It turns out net migration has actually gone down to 672,000, but only because the figure for the previous year has been revised to show that net migration actually hit a record level of 745,000. Lots of figures, sorry about that. In any case, the bottom line is it's put Rishi Sunak under renewed pressure from his party as Tory MPs are demanding action from ministers to bring down the numbers. Now, we're talking legal migration. These aren't the boats, by the way, this is legal migration. Joining me now is immigration lawyer Ivon Sampson and former leader of UKIP, Henry Bolton. Thank you very much for joining me, gentlemen. Now, it was all going so well for the Tories, wasn't it, with their autumn statement, and then 9:30 the following morning, we had the immigration figures and that burst their bubble. I'm going to come to you first, Henry. What did you make of the immigration figures we've seen this week?
Well, they're shocking, aren't they, in a number of respects. First of all, the numbers are unsustainable, and I think anybody who argues otherwise needs to look at a city the size of Bristol, just briefly. Bristol is actually at around about 617,000 a population, has 65 GP surgeries, 6 hospitals, 4 specialist medical clinics, 13 police stations, 141 care homes, 132 primary schools, 50 secondary schools. Now, if you, in the last 24 months, just to match the numbers that have come in, we would have had to have provided that sort of infrastructure, those sort of public services twice. So instead of 132 primary schools, 264. Then you've got to train and recruit and train the staff for such facilities, the 13 police stations, the 6 hospitals and so on. It is obviously quite beyond the realms of feasibility. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that it's shocking from the point of view that this is a government that has repeatedly promised the British people to reduce overall immigration. And it has gone up 3 times since the Conservative Party came to power. And that is a shocking indictment of the way that the party has conducted itself. Either it's been lying to the British people, or it has been simply so incompetent that it's not been able to carry out its policy. And I rather fear that it's the former, because many of the people coming here legally have come on visas that are given, according to government policy and the law and various rules governing that, the dependence of students. Then you've got low-skilled workers. And just to give you an example, Dawn, of where we are with that, a senior care worker working in the UK is going to be on the minimum wage of £11.44 as it is now. However, somebody who comes in from abroad on a low-skilled visa is going to be paid £7.63 per hour. And so we're bringing in effectively slave labour in a way, or certainly exploiting this, and it's not the individual who benefits. Actually, there are businesses making a great deal of money out of this. So, for example, the agencies that provide agency care workers and other staff. And it's the same in the agricultural sector, the science sector and so on. On a low-skilled visa, you get 80% of the normal salary for what that you'd normally expect if you were a Brit. And obviously that starts to price Brits out of the market as well. So there are all sorts of problems with this. It is a matter of government policy. The government could change this tomorrow.
Ivan, it's unsustainable. It has to stop. What's your comment to that?
Well, let me re-educate your listeners with the twaddle that Henry Bolton just said. First of all, let me just tell you, fact, you have to pay minimum wage. So I'm not sure where Henry's getting his figures from.
Government website, Ivan, I'll send you the link. It's on the government website.
Henry, I do this for a living, my friend. OK, this is what I do for a living. Mm-hmm. And let me tell you, you have to pay minimum wage under the standard occupation classified codes. SOC codes, Google it. Now, that's the first point. The other point, if you look at the numbers, the bulk of them are students and skilled workers. And this is the point. They're net contributors to our economy. If we reduced it, let's just say we didn't let anybody in next year, and let's not have these students, let's not have these migrant workers, well, let's bring it down to the tens of thousands. It will leave a hole in our economy close to about £100 billion. The biggest benefactors of these people are the British people themselves. And we have to remember that students, 80% of them return home under the ONS figures. But let me tell you, these figures are a temporary spike, Dawn. If you look at the Migration Observatory report by Oxford University, you'll see the trend over the next 10 years is going to see them come steadily down to about 300,000 a year. And so this is the spike has been brought out because of Ukraine, because of the Hong Kong visa system. So I think over the next 5 to 10 years, you'll see these figures coming right down to around about 300,000. I'll send you the report, Henry. Have a good read of it. And you'll see that...
I say, Henry, it's going to
You'll see
level out.
that the figures are just a temporary spike. There is no crisis. When's the last time you went to a hospital and you saw English doctors? You just don't. Our NHS system is propped up by migrant workers. And if we should be grateful that they're here looking after us instead of complaining and alienating them.
Henry?
Yeah, I'm not alienating anybody. I'm just laying out the facts. And the heading for the government's website that lays out the rates of pay for skilled workers, to meet the skilled worker shortage, is actually, it's called that, the Skilled Worker Visa Shortage Occupations, updated on the 7th of August 2023. You can Google that, and I'm quite happy to let GB News or anybody else have the link. It's right here in front of me. OK, maybe there's some confusion about that, but that's the government website. The other thing is, if we look at, for example, the NHS, I hear this argument all the time that we need foreign workers to come in and fill the gaps in our hospitals. Well, you know what? If you're a Filipino nurse or you're studying, the government in the Philippines will pay for your training, will pay for all of that education, and then you can sign up with an agency that will bring you across here and will go into the NHS here on a work visa. The answer to this is not to bring in cheap agency workers, fill the pockets of whatever agency in the UK or abroad that is doing this, and we should be providing that education, that training to our own nurses, to our own care workers and so on, not have to bring them in from abroad. And I think if you actually were to talk to people who run care homes, who sometimes have to rely on agency staff simply for the fact that we are a country that is not providing the training or the wages or the conditions for our own people, if you speak to them about the agency staff that sometimes they have to take on, they will tell you that very rarely have they got any training in giving medication or so to people who are living in care homes. They have very little training at all. So we're doing a disservice to the people in those care homes as well. It's a very complex thing, and there's a whole lot to unpack. But the other thing is, I talked about infrastructure, I've talked about services, you talk about housing, but there is, and we cannot deny this any longer, there is an issue of integration. We are now bringing in, last year, 750,000 people, the vast majority of whom, through no fault of their own, are coming from other cultures with other different sort of social norms, which I don't judge, but they are different to ours. And wherever you have such a situation, you end up with a certain amount of tension or friction. And beyond a certain point, that's not manageable. And to an extent, that is, and I don't in any way justify or excuse those horrendous riots in Dublin, but what you end up with is social tension that does spill over, and governments need to start listening to their populations. They're not at the moment.
Ivon, what would you say to that? I think it is a fair point that people are... and they're frightened of being called racist because they're frightened to raise the worries that they have about Britain and the UK losing its culture, losing its national identity. What would you say to that?
Well, look, I've integrated quite nicely into the British economy. I'm a foreigner. I wasn't born here, but I was educated here. I qualified here as a lawyer, and I set up a business and I employ lots of people. So there's a good success story for you, Henry. And look, do you hear this bluster, this right-wing bluster with absolutely no data? It is right-wing bluster, Henry, you know it. And with no data to back it up at all. Where is this tension? Where's the data? Tell me about this social cohesion. No, it's alienating people who've come here to benefit our country. And I think if you ask Rishi Sunak, he's integrated nicely as well. And many people will do the same. They will come here, they'll work, they'll pay their way, they will not take benefits, and they will contribute to our economy. And also, having different people from around the world, it's good for us. It's good for our culture. It's not a bad thing, Henry.
I'm not anti-immigration. I am pro-managed immigration at a rate that we can sustain, that we can provide the support for without detracting from the infrastructure and the public services that we already provide to the British people. And it's not right-wing to be concerned that those things are undeniably under pressure. Speak to anybody and they will tell you that. And the reality is that, you know, all I want peace on our streets. I want harmonious communities. I am not flagging up, trying to highlight the differences between people. I am trying to simply say governments need to listen to the legitimate concerns of people, and media and various commentators, and now we've always got on well in the past, but on this, I think you're fundamentally wrong. You are in denial, or you're being disingenuous in saying that there is no evidence out there for social tension. There is, and Dublin showed it. It is not right-wing for people and communities in South Wales, in the North West, in the Midlands, down in Kent or in Dublin to be concerned about this rate of change. It makes them feel, it is their perception that their environment, their society, their culture is under threat. And if that's not managed, then we are going to have problems. And if we deny that, those problems are certainly coming down the track at us. And I want to avoid that. That's not right-wing. That is just, I want peace and harmony on our streets and in our communities.
Ivon, what would you say to that?
It's simply this. It's just bluster from Henry, as always. Look, we want British people filling British jobs. This is the problem. We have 1 million people in the NHS waiting list. Why is that? Because of government policies. We have not enough people being trained properly. Why is that? Because of government policies. We don't have a proper education system. Why is that? Because of government policies. Don't blame the migrants. If I was you, Henry, I'd be going to my local MP, say, can we have some good policies that we can have better infrastructure, better NHS, more houses being built? Don't blame the migrants. You seem to think that the migrants are the cause of all of our problems.
Ivon,
they're not. They're bringing in money for our country.
Sorry, Ivon, can I just ask you one question? We're running out of time, unfortunately. Do you believe there should be any limit set on legal migration figures?
I think the markets are going to determine it. Look, if we can fill it with resident jobs, we should. But if we can't fill on the doctors and nurses and care workers and skilled workers, what do? We've got to employ them from somewhere. And so we should have a long-term policy to employ homegrown people to do these jobs. But for now, I'm afraid we need foreign migrants to do the work.
Gentlemen, thank you both for a very passionate debate. We're running out of time, unfortunately. That's Ivon Sampson, immigration lawyer, and Henry Bolton, Chief British Political Action Conference. Thank you very much for joining us this afternoon.